I'm working on a report of 25 native trees to Virginia and North Carolina. These trees are prevalent in the Piedmont region of the Mid-Atlantic United States, and I want to share with you today the value of native trees. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. A lot of cities and states have guidelines on what trees you can plant. Now, a lot of cities have guidelines on the types of trees they prefer you to have in your property, and they tend to be ornamental trees. Here's one big challenge. Many of those trees are not natively grown trees and require a lot of maintenance because they, again, are in an environment that they're not native to. Now, ultimately, when you plant a native tree, it tends to be climatized, meaning it grows well in that climate. It tends to be easier to maintain because it's less susceptible to the viruses and the bugs and the beetles and all the things in that particular climate. When you introduce exotic trees, and those would be trees that are not native to the area, they're going to require more maintenance. Now, cities have the benefit of recommending those things that look pretty. That's what they want. They want flowering trees. They want pretty trees. That's great. Many of these trees have little or no long-term value. And every tree has value, but what I mean by little or no long-term value is their wood is not good for firewood or making charcoal. Their wood doesn't decompose easily. The leaves are like crepe myrtles, for example. Beautiful. Crepe myrtles look beautiful, but they drop a lot of little tiny hard seed things. And they also grow rapidly. They're not native to the area, and their wood, while it's a hard-based wood, it doesn't make a very good axe handle. It doesn't make a very good pretty much anything. You can burn it in your fireplace, but it has a little bit of creosote. Ultimately, a city's not thinking about the utility value of the tree. But me, as someone who has a small farm, homestead, or an estate, I'm looking for maximum utility value because we have specific limitations on our land availability. Now, if you've got thousands of acres, that's a different story. But again, if you've got 5 or 10 acres or even 1 acre lot and you've got a large house on it, well, again, you've got to have those trees that are native so that you get the best growth, the best value and function, and you get it in the smallest area possible. Now, in the area of native trees, I got this list from an Eagle Scout who is doing a trail project at D Hart Park here in the region. And he gave me a list of the 25 native trees, and we're putting together a brochure so people can do a scavenger hunt and recognize these trees. But I'm going to share a few of them with you. Again, I'm in a Mid-Atlantic region, what's called a Piedmont region, and we're in Virginia near the North Carolina border. Cucumber magnolia. Now, by the way, many of these trees look beautiful. Like the cucumber magnolia and the American holly, great looking ornamental trees for a property. They can be maintained at an appropriate size. But magnolias and hollies tend to gain vertical growth. You can't top them in a way that would be appropriate so that you can have a smaller tree near the house. White oak is similar. Scarlet oak is similar. These are going to be tall, bold trees. You're going to want them a little further from the house. But both the white oak and the scarlet oak, you can actually in the northern red oak as well, you can manage those in such a way to get a saw log out of them by using pollarding. You can pollard the top of the trees over after they've grown a certain period of time. And it makes kind of a stumpy crown, a stumpy tree with a big crown on it. The dogwood, black cherry, and the black birch are actually pretty good for ornamental around the house because those grow slowly and they can be maintained at a smaller tree. It's easier to thin them out and maintain for a smaller tree. Again, there's a bunch of trees here. The tulip tree or yellow poplar, it's going to grow tall and it's going to grow fast. So it's not such a great tree for near the house. But ultimately, these trees, there's 25 of them. By the way, I'm going to share with you how you can get this copy of this special report. Even if it's in draft format when you request it, I'll get you a copy of it as it is. It's very useful. The key about what we're doing here is that there's a tree for every purpose. Not only is there a tree for every purpose, but some trees are more suited than others. For example, dogwoods near the house. Okay, 5-10 feet from the house, you could have a dogwood and its branches will never get out far enough to get near the house at that. You could easily maintain a tighter tree. I do see the crepe myrtles being well maintained in some places around here, but again, they tend to drop seed and spread out. So you need a good ground cover under them to challenge that seed or to make it easier to pick out the spreading plants. Cities tend to recommend plants that are sold by local nurseries because guess what? Local nurseries are recommending the trees. So they're going to recommend best-selling trees, high-margin trees, trees that easily propagate. For example, the eastern redbud is a native tree to my region, and it is on the recommended list for my city, but redbuds spread very easily. So redbud is a nitrogen-fixing tree. It's really good for setting up an area and preparing the soil for an area. So if you recently cleared land, you can put down the redbuds, and you can put down some of these other trees that are more establishing trees, and then interplant with them the oaks, the elms. Elm looks pretty good as an ornamental tree, and you blend in the oaks, and then next thing you know, the oaks overtake the redbuds. The redbuds had prepared the soil. The oaks overtake the redbuds, and then you have more of an oak tree area. So if you were to clear a large area of land that you're going to not use for pasture, you're going to take the large area and you're going to establish it as a forestry system, you might actually go out, clear the trees, take out the stumps, grass it, so turn it into pasture temporarily, plant redbuds in high density over the whole property. Then, once you're sure about your deer pressure, come back in and put your high value tree, your hickories, your oaks, your even your ironwood if you want. Put those in staggered between the redbuds, and then what will happen is the grasses, a mixture between nitrogen fixing plants like clovers and alfalfa, and the grass itself becomes the mulch for the redbuds. The redbuds accelerate, fixing nitrogen into the soil, which then feeds the oaks. And then before you know it, you end up with an oak forest with decent sized trees. Now the trees are going to grow fast in the beginning, so you need a good density so they grow fast and straight. But once they grow fast and straight, they're going to get less feed from the redbuds. And then after that, you're going to end up with nice, tall, straight oaks that in 3 to 4 years is a good little forest area. So you could take an acre, 2 acres off your property, turn it into these trees. In 30 years, you're going to have good timber trees that are nice and straight. That's the value of knowing what trees are native, because if you do this in an area and the trees are native, they will grow like weeds. They will grow like crazy. But if you try to put some different tree in, or you don't have that succession, you could end up with challenges. The same thing happens when you plant these trees in your yard. If you were to plant the redbuds and the oaks in your yard, the same way that we're describing here, you're actually going to end up with trees that grow too quickly. And if you have a very tall oak in your front yard, all by itself, growing very long and straight, it's susceptible to getting blown over. So again, a lot of the trees recommended by cities are actually going to be shorter trees. They're going to tend to be shorter trees. But the seeds are in the ground already for all these native plants. So you could plant a shorter tree, and then you see this pin oak come up, and then you're like, oh, that pin oak looks nice. Let's just let it go. The pin oak next thing takes over, and you have problems with large roots in your basement. You have problems with the tree being tall and skinny, get knocked over. You have other challenges. So again, we not only want to use native plants and trees, but we want to know which native plants and trees are appropriate for our landscaping, for what we want to use the property for, difference between timber and ornamental, its proximity to the house, so which zone is it in. Zone 1, you're probably not going to have any trees at all. But zone 2, you'll have trees that are more ornamental. And then when you get out to zone 4 and 5, you're going to have trees that are more forestry based, more landscape based. I talked with an individual who likes to hunt, and they took 2 acres on their property. We were looking at buying this particular house. They had 2 or 3 acres on the property that was planted forestry style with oaks to drop acorns. And the reason they wanted to do that is because it would attract deer. Okay, so the oaks grow up, they drop the acorns, the deer come along, they love the hunt, they now have plenty of deer to hunt. Now, another individual I talked with, they did the same thing except they ran hogs underneath the oak. So they had a variety of oaks that would grow up. Some of them had acorns, a variety of seasons. They would have a field next to it, and they'd run the hogs in paddocks, and then periodically run the hogs through the acorns in paddocks. They wouldn't just let them free in there. They'd run them through paddocks. So the hogs were actually keeping down the underbrush in the forest area, which reduced the chance of fire. The hogs were also eating the acorns and fertilizing. And then the hogs could be alternated between acorns and field. Now, the hogs don't eat grass. They tend to root up stuff. So what they're doing is they're tilling up the field a bit while they're being fed a feed. And then behind them would be chickens to spread the soil a little thinner, and then behind that would be some kind of grass that they were then growing, or some kind of garden crop. But periodically, the hogs were actually under the oaks, eating the acorns and eating the small trees and shrubberies, and it worked out. It was a very good combination. So again, we want to choose native plants. We want to layer in the function that we're looking for. And then we want to layer in the animals that fit the function. What you'll discover is that native plants will handle better the deer pressure and the other pressures that you're going to have in that area. And that's why they're a good choice. Again, if you're in the Mid-Atlantic region, especially if you're in the Piedmont region, I'm putting together this list of 26 different native Virginia, North Carolina, Piedmont region trees. And I know you'll be delighted planting some of these at your property. Red maples, for example, look beautiful. Great ornamental tree. The change in leaf and color is just delightful. The slippery elm has a very interesting bark. It gives it it's a patterned bark. The dogwoods, I have fruiting dogwoods in my property. Beautiful plant, looks great, and then the little fruits, you can eat them. And if you don't eat them, the birds will eat them, and you can enjoy watching the birds. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead, and this is just an example of appropriate plants and some of the ideas around how the native plants for your region actually add value beyond just the tree itself. It adds value in its interaction with wildlife and its interaction with animals you might have on your property, as well as its future value and potential, whether it's forestry or fruits. If you have any questions about what we're covering here, you can visit me at www.prosperityhomestead.org. Thank you so much for listening. Again, native trees, please get native trees for your property. Get appropriate trees for your spacing and your long-term interests, and you will not be disappointed. Thanks for listening, and visit us at www.prosperityhomestead.org.